How's it going, people? Welcome back to the channel. A lot of my videos are focused around facts and figures and information and basically bringing you all the sort of like basic stuff that you need to know about cars and car ownership. The thing is, a lot of what I do revolves around research. Like I spend a lot of time researching stuff relating to cars and basically trying to pull together as much information as possible for you guys. And part of that really impacts my own personal purchasing decisions of cars. Like when I'm researching cars all the time and finding out all this different stuff about them, I often find it quite difficult to work out what cars I actually want and what cars I actually want to buy, I suppose. And so in this video, I wanted to talk to you guys about the cars that I'm thinking about buying right now, as well as why I'm sort of in two minds about whether or not I buy them this year or in the future. I'm in the very fortunate position where I could potentially buy an exotic car this year or maybe next year or any time in the next sort of little while, and I wanted to go through my thought process as to whether or not I actually will do that, and hopefully it'll be helpful for some of you guys who are thinking about doing the same things for yourselves. Anyway, don't remember to like, comment, subscribe, all that great stuff, and without further ado, let's get into the video. So yes, as I mentioned in the introduction, I am interested. I'm sort of testing the waters around buying a supercar, and currently that seems ridiculous because I own two MX-5s and one 2002 Polo 9N. So those cars all in total I think cost me around about £4 grand, just under £4 grand in total, which is just nuts. And my previous car history is a Skoda Fabia estate, so I've not had anything to do with supercars or exotic cars in my entire life. But I have a full-time day job where I work in financial services, in consulting, and that pays reasonably well. Like it pays above the national average, and I'm in London, so I get London-based pay as well. So on that front, I'm in a stable and secure job, and I'm pushing hard, and I've recently had a promotion. So all of these things together are sort of helping with my mindset towards why I might buy a supercar. And then on top of that, I have a YouTube channel which is growing, and the viewership is growing, and you guys are liking and commenting and subscribing and all that good stuff. And all together, it means that I'm earning probably about, I don't know, 3 to 5 times the amount on YouTube right now that I was the same time last year. Give me 2 seconds. It would be rude not to, let's be real. So yes, I have these two sources of income. Of course, the vast majority of my YouTube income goes back into YouTube, but this year I'm starting to save a lot more of it, especially now that I'm getting a lot more of it. I'm trying not to brag, by the way. It's not a braggadocious thing that I'm trying to do here. This is for the sake of trying to just be transparent with you and explain the situation. And not just myself, but lots of my friends as well who also work in finance or in the city and have been stuck at home for quite a long time because of lockdown measures. They've started to put more money aside, and they're starting to think to themselves, oh, maybe I could afford to finance myself into a supercar or finance myself into something a little bit nicer than the Polos and stuff that we have been driving for the last 6 or 7 years of our lives. So before I get into why I'm in two minds about buying a supercar this year, let me start by talking about the 3 different cars in particular, sports cars and supercars and whatever, that I'm interested particularly in buying. So one of them is the Mark 1 Audi R8 V8 in manual. For me, it's like a proper dream car. Like, I've loved the Audi R8 since before I can remember. It's always been a car in my mind that I'd always just wanted to own. It's definitely like an entry-level supercar, come sports car or whatever, and it sits in the sort of 30 to 40,000 pounds range, depending on what kind of condition you want to go for. I know all of the things that go wrong with them in general. I know pretty much everything in terms of how much they cost to maintain. It's quite expensive, but it's not horrific compared to a lot of other cars within its class. It's reasonably fast. It's got a reasonable amount of presence. I don't think the values are going to go anywhere as well. I think they're pretty much stagnant in that 30 to 40k region, as they have been for quite some time now. So all in, I think it's relatively reasonable as an investment to run around in. I'm not going to potentially lose as much money on it, other than in terms of maintenance, repairs and all that other good stuff. Plus, having an R8 at 25, I would be very happy. Now another one is the Alfa Romeo 4C, which, if you've watched my video where I got to drive one, is 100% full-on dream car for me right now. It makes me very happy to think about the idea of ever owning one, and having driven one as well that really gassed me up. Yeah, I'd absolutely love to. I know it's got a much smaller engine. It's potentially slightly less exotic than an R8 in terms of supercar performance, etc. But that doesn't mean that I don't love it. I still think it's an absolutely stunning car, so I don't see why I would necessarily not buy one. The prices have sat relatively still around the 35 to 40k mark, and in many cases they've actually gone up in value as well. So all in, not a bad shout. I think they look absolutely stunning. I think they drive absolutely incredibly. They sort of remind me of like a step up from this. The one thing that I'm not a fan of is the fact that they have a paddle gearbox rather than a manual. I've always been a big manual fan, but I could definitely get over that. And I also feel like paddle gearboxes are more exotic feeling or more exotic focused. I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's just kind of how I feel about them. Like if you bought a supercar today, you're getting it with a paddle box in it. You're not really going to get one with a manual anymore. There's only a few that actually come like that. So yeah, I think it's absolutely beautiful. I think the interior could be slightly better, but I would love to own one, man. I think they're just so sick. And the third and final car that I'm very interested in at the moment in particular is the Lotus Exige, either the 350 Sport or the S or whatever I can basically get my hands on. I just think I've always been a massive Lotus fan, and the S3 Lotus Exige in particular I just find amazing. I really love that car. Obviously 3.5 litre V6 supercharged, it's right up my street, lightweight, stripped out interior. They are my kind of car. Now my one thing that makes me think maybe to not go for the Lotus Exige is that one of my dream cars is actually the 430 Cup or the Cup 430, whatever you want to call it, and I would definitely always wish that I had the 430 even if I had the 350 or the S or whatever. So yes, I'd be very happy with the car, but I'd always feel like I wanted more, whereas with the R8 and with the 4C, I kind of just want those cars for those cars' sakes. I feel like if I went for the 350, I would be compromising or substituting, basically. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just that if I'm gonna buy my first exotic car, it should be the car that I want. It shouldn't be like the car that I kind of wanted. Now, obviously with all three of these cars, I'd be financing myself onto them. I wouldn't just spend 30, 40 grand on one of these up front and just spend that in cash, although I wouldn't mind doing that. I need money at the moment for a house deposit and other kind of stuff, so I have the money for a deposit on one of those cars. But as I said before, I'm still kind of in two minds around whether or not I actually want to go for it and send it. Now there are a few reasons for this, and some of them might be relevant to you and some of them might not be. So I'm going to talk about why I probably shouldn't buy one of these, and then also why I really want to buy one of these. For me, it's a case of just because you can doesn't necessarily mean that you should, or that it's the best decision for you in the long term. So on the one hand, I should really be thinking at the age of 25 about being able to kind of set myself up for the long term, or at least my brain is thinking like, how can I best set myself up to be sorted in the long term, not just in terms of YouTube and life and whatever, but I mean like financially and that kind of stuff. With YouTube doing better and with me earning more at work and getting these promotions and starting to move up in the world of finance and money, I need to start thinking about how I can cement myself in those positions and make myself feel comfortable for the longer term. And just because I'm getting into a better position financially doesn't necessarily mean that £40,000 isn't still £40,000. To me, 40 grand is just ridiculous. The most I've ever spent on anything in my entire life is my sim rig, and that was £2,300, and that felt like a lot to come out of my account. So £40,000 is a lot of money. And when you think that £40,000 is a reasonable start to a deposit on a house in London, although London house prices are ridiculous anyway, I really don't know whether it's a good idea to spend that much money on a car. On top of that as well, just because I have YouTube as something to give me a secondary source of income, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's always going to be there. You guys might stop finding my videos interesting, you might stop watching, I might get a lower CPM rate, so like get less money per 1,000 views and all that other kind of stuff. And obviously I still want to keep doing YouTube because I like videos and I like making videos and I do this for the fun of it. But whilst it's enabling me to have more money, I can't necessarily think to myself 100% in the future I will still have more money. I'm the kind of person who is more than willing to take a risk, but when that risk might come at the expense of being able to afford to buy a house or at the expense of my future state financially, I still have to think about it. Another thought of mine is that I have only very recently gotten to a stage where I can actually afford to buy one of these cars. And that has come through a lot of hard work at work and also on YouTube. And obviously I want to keep doing that hard work and making the most of my time and trying to be useful and trying to, I don't know, keep making half decent money and whatever so that I can afford to run and drive an exotic car. But at the same time, it makes me think like, if I kept working hard and kept pushing really hard to get all this stuff done, maybe I could afford a better supercar in the future, a car that no one would debate around being called a supercar, or maybe I could set myself up in a position where the idea of buying an exotic car isn't one where I have to make a whole YouTube video about it and work out whether or not I'm in the financial position to do it. I could just be in the position to just pull the trigger and say, yeah, I want a 4C, so I'm just going to buy one. But it almost feels like it's more responsible for me to sit on the financial position that I'm in and keep developing that financial position and getting to a position of more longer term wealth, so that the idea of buying an exotic car isn't an exciting, oh my gosh, quick, let's buy one because I've now got a tiny bit of money behind me. It should instead be a case of, oh, actually, like, I'm stable, I'm consistently stable, this is not a difficult financial decision to make, I've got a house, I'm in a good position basically, and just nailing it. I know that some people will be listening at home and thinking like, oh mate, if I got the money I'll just send it, and I know there are lots of YouTubers that do that, and I'm absolutely not knocking that kind of hustle, because buying loads of cars and doing YouTube videos on them is a very lucrative market, but I know very much that I'm not going to do that. If I buy an Alfa Romeo 4C this year, I don't want to sell it, I want to keep it. I'm buying it because I actually really like the car, not because I think it will make great YouTube content. Yes, I'll 100% make great YouTube content, and yes, I'll be buying the car partially because I want to make YouTube videos on it, but there's still that aspect of like, I've bought my first exotic car and I want to keep it. Also, there's this point around financing a car. Once you've financed a car like that, you are tied down to it. It's the same with when I finally decide to buy a house, which I might also decide to do this year, or have the position to do this year if I don't necessarily go straight in and buy a supercar or an exotic. When you buy something like that, you're pretty tied to it. So in terms of leaving your job to go and get paid less somewhere else to do something else, that could be quite difficult, or like a sticky situation. I don't know whether I want those kinds of financial ties. Yes, I could afford a finance deal on a 4C, but I would have to consistently keep being able to afford it, and that would mean that I wouldn't ever be able to sort of leave my job or take some time off of YouTube or do any of those things. I'd have to keep doing them in order to just be a slave to that monthly. So I'm basically trying to say is, you shouldn't be a slave to the monthlies. The monthly should be the easy part, so that you're still flexible and agile enough to move jobs or change strategies or try making weird different types of YouTube videos that people might not enjoy and all that other kind of stuff. And a personal reason as to why I'm sort of in two minds about it is because I like to complete stuff. I don't like to just leave stuff in, like, not complete. And so this car here isn't done yet. I need to do the interior on this, I need to do the brakes on this, I've got a few other bits and bobs I want to do to it. I want to take it to the Nürburgring, all that kind of stuff. I don't want to just kind of up and drop this project and buy an exotic car and then this just kind of gets left for dust, which is sort of what I did with the Polo when I first bought this. So I want to finish this car, I want to finish the other MX-5 as well. I've got great plans for that one, which I need to enact at some point once it gets a little bit less cold and wet and dreary. So I want to do some stuff to that other MX-5, and I also want to kind of get the Polo into a position where I'm happy with it, where I think that I have completed the Pointless Polo project. So there's that whole completion aspect of things as well. Like, I shouldn't necessarily move on to an exotic until I feel like I've completed this level of car. And by the way, I'm not saying that I'll suddenly stop having cheap cars, because my whole channel is based around cheap cars. I like cheap cars. These things make me happy. Now, I've spoken a lot about reservations, and probably for some people that will be a bit boring or sound a bit like whiny or complaining. I'm not complaining, I'm just trying to basically put my thoughts onto paper or give you guys a basic understanding of where I'm at in my head. Let's have a think about the reasons why I do want to buy an exotic car and a supercar basically as soon as I can, and the things that are driving me towards looking at these cars on Auto Trader every day and thinking like, oh, I could just do this. On the one hand, I don't think I'd regret it. I genuinely think that if I bought an exotic car tomorrow, it would just be positive. I don't think I would look back in a few years' time and think to myself like, I shouldn't have bought that 4C, or I shouldn't have bought that R8, that was a bad decision. Because I think I would enjoy owning it enough that wouldn't really be the case. So with that knowledge, I think to myself, like, why not just send it, just get the car? There's also the fact around the idea that if you make money and just stack money and you don't actually do anything with it, then kind of what's the point? I very much see money as an enabler. Money is going to enable me to do fun things. It's going to enable me to drive nice cars and live in a half decent house and be able to provide for a family and all that other good stuff. And so the money should be used. It shouldn't just kind of sit. I think at the moment I'm just kind of letting it sit. I'm not spending much on the MX-5s, I'm not spending much on the other MX-5 or the Polo. It's just sitting. And so if money is for fun and I'm not using it for fun, then I don't know, I'm just not living by my own morals. And as kind of part of that reason, I know I can afford one now. Like, I'm in a position where I can theoretically afford to buy one of these cars. And at no point before in my life have I been in a position to afford to buy one of these cars. And so I'm sitting here and I'm thinking to myself, I could buy a supercar. Like, I'm gassed. And so maybe with time, that sort of excitement will die down a little bit, and that will be less of a driver towards me going for a rogue decision to just buy an exotic. But at the same time, that feeling of excitement is there. I've always wanted a supercar my entire life. As soon as I can suddenly actually afford to buy one, why am I sitting here and umming and ahhing about it? There's another point on this as well, which is that if I bought a supercar, it would open me up to another market on YouTube. Now, as I said before, I'm not a buyer and seller of cars on YouTube. I don't buy cars, show the whole buying experience, and then sell it afterwards and make some profit from the fact that I did that with a whole bunch of other brand deals and whatever. Although I have got a couple of brand deals on the way, which I'm really excited about. But this would open me up to a whole bunch of other potential markets on YouTube. I have a lot of great young support from all of my first car style videos and the videos from the Polo. I have a lot of support from people who like tuning their cars, because I do the odd modification on the MX-5s and stuff. I think all in, I've got some good potential audiences that I can catch by buying an exotic car at a young age as well. And I think it would be interesting to document the experience of being a 25-year-old trying to run one of those cars on a relatively reasonable budget as well. Like, I'm saying that I'm making enough to be able to buy one of these. Only reason I can actually do that is because, by the way, I'm living at home at the moment. I haven't moved out yet, so I've been able to actually afford to save and invest and put my money aside. And the final reason I wanted to mention is just to reward myself. I have been working very hard. I've been doing like very long weeks to be able to get work done and also get YouTube done, and all of that. At some point you need to reward yourself for the work that you put in. If you're working really hard, then you need to reward yourself for that at times. And yeah, I feel like an exotic car would be that reward for me. So I don't know, I'm just thinking about it. But anyway, yes, I hope that this has been useful for some of you. I know that the main part of my audience is around about the same age as me, and so I thought that maybe some of you might be in the same situation and might, I don't know, like having someone else airing out their situation a little bit more to maybe help you guys with some of your thoughts. Will I buy a supercar this year? Maybe. Will I buy one next year? Maybe. I'd really like to. I just don't know where I'm at in my head yet. I obviously want one, but I think I need to still spend a little bit more time easing myself into the idea of purchasing it. As always, a massive thank you to the patrons and to you guys for watching, because without you guys, this video would never have been possible in the first place. But thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.